Okay, welcome to the mass hysteria. I'm going to do my best to describe this. Bear with me because I really don't know how I'm going to explain it. It's one of those things that I know and it's hard to kind of like interpret, but I'm going to do the best I can. So bear with me. I might make a few mistakes along the way. I'll correct myself. Sometimes I'm going to look on the back of the issue because I need a date because some of these don't have dates on them. They pretty much go by numbers. Like as I discussed in another video, the Ring magazine, The Ring, sold to Norman Keitzer. Norman changed the name to The Rings, just by adding an S to it. So it's now The Rings, formerly The Ring. Quality changed, the articles changed, everything's completely changed. Not so much for the best either. So this will be the first issue of The Rings with an S. I didn't show this on the last video, even though it's 1979, because it's a different company and I'd rather just keep it all simple so you understand which ones were from which and where they came from. Okay, so The Rings with an S, November 79, January 1980. They made the name real small here. It says The Rings. It looks like wrestling's dominant, but it's Rings really small. This is April 80. June 1980. This one is expensive for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, here's change number one. And it doesn't last long. They got rid of the rings and went with just the title Wrestling. Now, inside the magazine, it states that they are going with the new name, a new layout for the combination of the rings and Wrestling News. And they were going to change it and combine it and call it just Wrestling Magazine, like we discussed in a video from 1951. It was just wrestling. That lasted exactly 1 month. Because the following month in December, they have the rings back on. Now, this is issue number 66, I believe. Yes, this is issue number 66 in the numbering system from Wrestling News. Wrestling News, number 67 and number 66, this issue of the rings, they merged together. So the rings is now jumped inside of Wrestling News' numbering system. The Wrestling News went from issue number 1 to 64 all by themselves. So they ran as a separate magazine and they ran by a numbering system more so than a date. And those issues weren't for mass consumption. They were not on the magazine stands, the newsstands. They were sold in arenas as an arena mag. So they didn't have the licensing for distributing. So once they bought the rings, the registration and the distribution license was handed over to them, so they were able to get it onto the newsstands. So they decided to merge the two magazines together and put them on the stands together. So December of 1980 will be the first issue of the rings joined with Wrestling News in the numbering system. The numbering system is extremely, that's a video all for itself, because they had the AWA edition, the NWA edition, WWF edition, Northwest edition, Southwest edition. Wrestling News had editions from all over the place with all different numbering systems. So to keep it very simple, we're going to take this from 1960, number 66, 1980, all the way up, and try to make it as less confusing as I can. Okay, so far now we're going to be in order, one after one, in a numbering system with rings and Wrestling News. Excuse me. This is number 67 and it's Wrestling News. Wrestling News, if it makes it any easier or makes it harder, Wrestling News is odd numbers and Rings Wrestling is even numbers. If that helps you, I don't know. If not, take it for what it's worth. Okay. So they alternate every month, alternating Wrestling Ring News every other month. So Wrestling Rings would be number 68. And you notice there's no date on it. It's just number 68. This one has the date and the number. So March of 81, number 69. April 81, which would be number 70. It's not numbered. It's numbered inside. Number 71 is Wrestling News. Back to the rings, 72, number 72. Back to Wrestling News, number 73. Back to the rings, number 74. You get the idea now. Back to Wrestling News, number 75. The Rings Wrestling, 76. Wrestling News, 77. Wrestling News, 78. All right, now watch this. The Rings Wrestling number 78. What's the difference? Nothing. Exactly the same magazine, released and printed twice, with just a different heading from Wrestling's News to Wrestling Ring, and they're both in January and December 81, 82. So December 81, January 82 would be this issue, just to add more confusion to it. Basically, it's just a double print. We are at issue 79, and it's Wrestling News. The Rings, number 80. And here it is again. Wrestling News, 80. The Rings, 80. They're both 80. Why? No idea. Don't know why it didn't go to 81, but I guess they saved it for the following month because they did a double print. 81 would be the following month in March. This is Wrestling News. March of 82, number 81. Okay? Driving you crazy yet? Wrestling News again, number 82. So this is 3 Wrestling News in a row, no rings. They kind of disappeared for a few. When you would think it would continue alternating, but it doesn't. Now we have the Rings is back, and it's listed as June, July 82. Now they're putting double months on it just to make it more confusing. So that brings us to Wrestling News, issue number 83. No issue 84. I have no clue why. There is an explanation in here. Wrestling Revue. They had now bought Wrestling Revue, brought it out from 1980, it's being its last issue. In July of 82, they brought it back into circulation under Norman Keitzer's Wrestling News. And now Wrestling Revue is part of Wrestling News' numbering system. Wrestling News is no more. So Wrestling News finished as of, say, issue 83, and that would have been summer of 82. July 1982 Wrestling Revue would be issue number 1 in the return of the circulation. Issue number 1 in Wrestling Revue circulation, but issue 85 in the numbering system of Wrestling News. Boing! Wrestling The Rings, August 82, number 86. Wrestling Revue, number 87. Wrestling Rings, October 82, number 88. Wrestling Revue, November 82, number 89. Number 90, The Rings, December 82. 91, Wrestling Revue, January 83. Number 92, The Rings, number 92. Wrestling Revue, March of 83, number 93. The Rings, April 83, and it's number 94. Wrestling Revue, May 83, number 95, signed by Jerry. It's also signed by Scott Casey at the top. Wrestling Rings, June 83, number 96. Wrestling Revue, June of 83, number 97. Back to the Rings, July 83, number 98. 99 is June of 83, Wrestling Revue. Back to the Rings, August 83, issue 100. This one sells for kind of a lot of money too, which I'm surprised. No reason why, it just, for some reason, it costs a lot of money. August 83, number 101. Wrestling Revue, The Rings Wrestling, September 83. I'm trying to see the number 102. Wrestling Revue, September 83, issue 103. I'm just thinking, because it makes a change here somewhere. I just don't want to miss it. Back to the Rings, October 83. number 104. Okay, I'm stopping thinking. Wrestling Revue. Wrestling Revue is going to end soon, so I wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. October 83, number 105. I think this is the last one. Wrestling Rings. Don't see the date. It is number 106. Wrestling Revue. It is so small. It's not written on there. No, it's number 107. It says September 83. I was just looking for the number. Okay, there is no 108. Rings ended. So there's no more Rings magazine. It's now just Wrestling Revue. So Rings is done. Wrestling News is done. Or is it? So we've got July 1984, just Wrestling Revue, number 109. Somebody got smart and started putting a number across the top. So now we can see what numbers they are. So Wrestling Revue, number 110, no date anymore. So the dates are off. At least some of them anyway. Not all of them, but there's no dates on this one. Wrestling Revue, number 111. This is data, September 84. Wrestling Revue, 112, October 84. Wrestling Revue, number 113. No date again. This is also an expensive one to find, and they both have the mustaches, the rock and rolls. Yep, no date. But number 113, okay? This is number 114, again, February 1985, 114. April 85, 115. Excuse me, I got ahead of myself. Let's go back a second. So Wrestling Revue, I knew there was something about this one. Wrestling Revue, this is the last Wrestling Revue, final issue, 113, no date. I'm going to assume it's November, somewhere like that, December of 85, judging by the last magazine I went through this. So this is it. Wrestling Revue ends right here at this issue 113. Title change once again, and it's back to Wrestling News. So Wrestling News is the rebirth, if you want, after a few years. It kicks back up at number 114 and February 1985. So I guess this would make this either January of 85 or December 84, somewhere around there. So 114, Wrestling News. Wrestling News, 115, April 85. Wrestling News, 116, no date, just 85, autographed by Road Warrior Animal. 117, Wrestling News, August 85. 118, October 85, Wrestling News. 119, December 85, Wrestling News. 120, Wrestling News with no date. Wrestling News 121 with a date of June 86. Wrestling News number 122, no date. And Wrestling News 123 with no date. And that's the final. Whew. That is really hard if you're a collector trying to figure out what issues were out there, which ones follow the numbering system. Honestly, this was easy. When you go from 165 down, when it's Wrestling News, and you're trying to get the numbers for all the different territories and the different editions, forget it. It's almost near impossible to find all those anyway. So many of them were just, like I said, arena magazines. They weren't for mass consumption, so there's not a lot of them out there. And it's almost not worth even bothering because they're just so sporadic and so hard to come by. It's like trying to collect every program in existence. It's like nearly impossible to ever own every wrestling program. Although I do have just about every Madison Square Garden program from 75 to 85. But it's really hard to get an arena magazine and be able to complete that wasn't on the newsstands. So these Wrestling News, Reviews, and Rings were all the newsstand versions that were for mass production, and each and every numbering system in line all the way up, so you can trace it back and try to complete your collection. So I hope this helps somebody. It was a lot of information to study this on. All right, see you in the next one.